Welcome to Mid-Century Memory Lane, where we bring the beauty, style, and forgotten details of the past back into view. In today's video, we are traveling farther back than the mid-century years to explore a remarkable chapter in American fashion. Long before modern clothing became simple, light, and practical, women wore garments shaped by steel hoops, layers of fabric, elaborate padding, and strict rules of etiquette. These clothes may appear unusual to modern eyes, but in their own time, they represented beauty, dignity, freedom, status, and sometimes even sorrow. So settle in as we look back at 11 of the most beautiful and unusual American fashions of the past. We begin with the hoop skirt, one of the grandest silhouettes of the 19th century. Popular from the late 1850s through the Civil War era, these dresses opened outward in a great bell shape. Beneath the visible fabric was a cage of flexible steel hoops, holding the skirt away from the legs and allowing layer after layer of cloth to fall in smooth, sweeping lines. In a formal room, the effect could be magnificent. A woman seemed to glide rather than walk, surrounded by her own moving circle of silk, wool, or printed cotton. But elegance came with complications. Doorways became narrow. Carriages became crowded. Sitting beside another person required planning. The hoop skirt was not merely clothing, it was architecture worn upon the body. But width was only the beginning. By the late 1860s, fashion began shifting its weight toward the back. The result was the extraordinary bustle dress. From the front, the skirt could appear comparatively smooth and controlled. Turn to the side, however, and the entire design changed. Layers of drapery, bows, pleats, fringe, and folded fabric rose behind the wearer, supported by pads, wire frames, or rigid structures fastened beneath the skirt. During the more dramatic bustle years of the 1880s, the projection could become so pronounced that it looked almost like a small platform. Yet when beautifully made, the silhouette had remarkable dignity. The trailing folds moved with ceremony, turning every entrance into a performance. The bustle showed how completely fashion could reshape the human figure and how confidently society accepted the transformation. Then fashion moved upward from the skirt to the shoulders. In the late 1820s and early 1830s, women wore sleeves so large that they nearly rivaled the width of the bodice itself. Known as Gigot sleeves, or leg of mutton sleeves, they swelled dramatically from the shoulder before narrowing sharply toward the wrist. Combined with a fitted waist and a broad skirt, they created a striking hourglass framed by enormous wings of fabric. Some sleeves needed stiff lining, padding, or special supports to prevent them from collapsing. The proportions now seem theatrical, but period portraits reveal how graceful they could appear. The broad shoulders made the waist look smaller and the face more delicate. This was fashion working through illusion, altering not the body itself, but everything the eye believed about it. Yet perhaps the strangest surprise was waiting at the seaside. A Victorian bathing costume from the 1870s or 1880s might include a long tunic, full trousers, stockings, shoes, and sometimes a cap or broad-brimmed hat. Striped fabric, sailor collars, decorative trim, and gathered sleeves gave these outfits a cheerful resort character. But by modern standards, they scarcely resemble swimwear at all. They look more like clothing for a seaside promenade. Once wet, the heavy wool or cotton fabric could cling to the body and become difficult to move in. Modesty was considered more important than speed or comfort. Even the act of entering the water was shaped by social rules. These remarkable garments remind us that a day at the beach was once less about freedom and far more about preserving respectability. Not every unusual outfit was created merely to decorate the body. In the early 1850s, the bloomer costume appeared with a shorter dress worn over loose trousers gathered at the ankles. To modern eyes, the outfit seems modest, practical, and almost innocent. At the time, however, the sight of a woman openly wearing trousers could provoke ridicule, criticism, and public debate. The design allowed greater freedom of movement than the heavy skirts normally expected of women. It became associated with dress reform and with those who believed that clothing should not prevent women from walking, working, or participating in public life. The bloomer did not immediately replace conventional fashion. Its importance was quieter than that. It introduced a radical question. Should a woman's clothing serve tradition, or should it serve the woman wearing it? Other garments spoke not of freedom, but of loss. During the Victorian era, mourning clothing turned personal grief into a visible public language. A widow might wear an entirely black dress made from dull, non-reflective fabric, accompanied by black gloves, dark jewelry, and a long veil that partially concealed the face. As the mourning period continued, rules could permit gradual changes in fabric, ornament, and subdued color. To the modern eye, these dresses can appear mysterious and strikingly beautiful. Yet their beauty was never intended to be cheerful. Every surface communicated absence, restraint, and remembrance. Clothing told neighbors how grief should be acknowledged and how long it should remain visible. There was a time when sorrow had its own wardrobe. You do not see that anymore. But behind closed doors, fashion could become softer and far more intimate. The tea gown emerged in the late 19th century as an elegant garment for receiving close friends or relaxing at home. It was long, flowing, and richly decorated with lace, ribbons, pleats, embroidery, and softly draped fabric. Unlike formal visiting or evening dresses, many tea gowns were designed to be worn with less rigid corsetry. That small difference gave the body a freedom rarely permitted in public fashion. Yet comfort did not mean simplicity. A fine tea gown could be as elaborate as anything worn in a ballroom, although its beauty was quieter and more personal. It belonged to lamplight, drawing rooms, polished tea services, and private conversation, a kind of luxury meant to be seen by only a chosen few. Long before that softness appeared, American wardrobes had embraced a very different kind of simplicity. Around the turn of the 19th century, the Empire line dress placed the waist directly beneath the bust and allowed the skirt to fall in a long, nearly uninterrupted column. Light fabrics and pale colors created an appearance inspired by the imagined grace of the ancient world. The body seemed taller, lighter, and less confined. In portraits, these dresses often appear almost timeless, yet their simplicity was startling when compared with the elaborate structures that would dominate only a few decades later. Fashion does not always move steadily toward greater comfort or greater complexity. It changes direction, forgets itself, and begins again. The Empire dress reminds us that one generation's modern simplicity can become the next generation's distant memory. By the end of the century, movement itself began to reshape women's clothing. The bicycle brought independence, speed, and a new practical problem. How could a woman ride safely while wearing a long skirt? Cycling costumes of the 1890s offered several answers. Some used divided skirts that looked like ordinary skirts while standing but separated into wide, trouser-like sections during movement. Others featured shorter hems, tailored jackets, neat shirtwaists, or small devices that kept fabric away from the wheels. These garments remained respectable by the standards of the day, yet they represented a decisive shift. Clothing was finally being adjusted to accommodate an activity rather than forcing the activity to accommodate the clothing. The bicycle did more than carry women down the road. It gave fashion a reason to make room for freedom. From that new freedom emerged one of America's most recognizable ideals of beauty. The Gibson girl of the 1890s and early 1900s wore a crisp shirtwaist, a long bell-shaped skirt, and an elaborate mass of hair swept high upon the head. Her corseted figure often formed the famous S-curve, with the chest carried forward and the hips drawn back. The silhouette was carefully constructed, but the woman it represented appeared energetic, self-possessed, and unmistakably modern. She might be shown reading, playing sports, traveling, or looking calmly unimpressed by the men around her. The Gibson girl was not complete liberation, but she was no passive ornament. She stood between two eras, still dressed in the discipline of Victorian fashion, yet already carrying the confidence of the 20th century. Far from the fashionable avenues, clothing told a quieter American story. On farms, homesteads, and frontier settlements, women needed dresses that could endure work, weather, travel, and repeated repair. High necklines, long sleeves, full skirts, aprons, shawls, and practical bonnets offered protection from sun, dust, and cold. The fabrics were often simple, sturdy, and chosen for usefulness rather than display. A single dress might serve for cooking, tending children, working outdoors, receiving visitors, in making a journey into town. Its beauty came not from luxury, but from care. A neatly mended seam, a clean white collar, a small printed pattern chosen to brighten an otherwise difficult day. These dresses rarely dominated fashion plates, yet they belonged to the women who helped build everyday American life. Their elegance was the elegance of endurance. These clothes once appeared in drawing rooms, railway stations, busy streets, farmhouses, and along the American shore. They belonged to ordinary days as much as they belonged to formal portraits. Today we encounter them mostly in museums, paintings, family albums, and carefully preserved photographs. What once seemed perfectly normal can now appear almost unbelievable. But perhaps that is one of the quiet lessons of fashion. It changes so completely that even the ordinary may one day become extraordinary. Which of these old American fashions would you most like to see brought back to life? Share your choice in the comments, visit our channel for more journeys into the past, and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story. These clothes may seem strange to us now, but to the women who wore them, they were simply part of everyday life. Thank you for joining us, and until next time.